Museum. I'm Dick Alabrini, the curator, and welcome to beautiful Littleton, New Hampshire on a wonderful day, Saturday morning. Today's program is on Bette Davis. Now, some of you might remember that we did one of these programs. We did a Bette Davis program back, maybe about 7 or 8 weeks ago. But if you noticed on the advertisement of the notice I set out on Facebook, that it was not good. So decided to run it again. So here we go. Bette Davis. Everyone, there's not many people out there who doesn't know the name Bette Davis. Now, Bette Davis had a vacation home in Sugar Hill, New Hampshire, just a stone's throw from Littleton. Now, if you're familiar with the area, if Bette wanted to do food shopping, clothing shopping, it didn't happen in Sugar Hill. It happened on Main Street in Littleton. Littleton became her other home. She had a lot of friends in the area. She was seen on Main Street and in stores. You could go into the A&P, buy pork chops, and Bette was standing next to you buying chopped beef. So she was there. She was there. Now, a little bit about Bette to give you a background on her. We have on this side, this is the display, we have on this side some of her history. And Ruth Elizabeth Davis was her full name. October 5th, 1908 to, April 5th, 1908 to October 6th, 1989. She passed at the age of 81. Height, 5 feet 3 inches. And if you look at our Bette Davis cutout, that's 5 feet 3 inches. So this is the height, or was the height of Bette. Well, it is the height of the cutout, was the height of Bette. I'm going to move Bette back over here. All right. Eddie was married 4 times. Her first husband was Harmon Nelson, married 1932 to 1938. She was married to Arthur Farnsworth from 1940 to 43. That marriage ended because Arthur passed away. He was, I believe he was 34, 35 years old. Then she married William Sherry, 1945 to 1950, and then Gary Merrill, 1950 to 1960. I will talk a little bit more about Arthur Farnsworth as we go into the program. Now, as I told you, she had a home in Sugar Hill. And she came to Sugar Hill. She had done 2 movies in 1939, back to back, and she was exhausted. And she originally came from Lowell, Massachusetts. So she decided to head north for a break. And she stayed at Peckett's in Sugar Hill. The building no longer exists. But the Peckett's became very, very close friends to Bette. And while at Peckett's, she met a young man, and I believe he was an assistant manager named Arthur Farnsworth. Now, Arthur was really quite a guy. He was a looker. He was intelligent. He had a pilot's license. He played the violin beautifully, and Bette just thought he was the best thing going since cream cheese on a bagel. So what she would do, Bette used to go for a walk before lunch, and she would get lost quite often. And the only person who could find her was Arthur. And this was at Brattlebale Falls in Franconia. And there is a rock there. And on the back of the rock, toward the bottom, it's hard to find, I have an article here, and it says, can you get that in, Glenn? Tell me when.
Good, good, good.
All right. Here's an article, and it's the Keeper of Stray Ladies. And on this, there is, can you see the plaque?
Yep.
All right. Bette had that plaque put there after Arthur passed away. And you notice it doesn't have Bette's name on it. If it did have Bette's name on it, I'm pretty sure someone would have tried to have pried it off of that rock years ago. So it says, in memoriam to Arthur Farnsworth, the Keeper of Stray Ladies, Peckett's, 1939, erected by a grateful one. And we know the grateful one was Bette Davis. Now, she would sit on that rock, and that's where Arthur would find her every time. Now, I understand that everyone knew where Betty was lost. So what would happen is, if Arthur wasn't working that day, she would be lost, not knowing Arthur wasn't working. They would send another employee. She would send them away, and the only one who could find her was Arthur. Now, Arthur proposed to her 3 times. Finally, they were married on New Year's Eve, 1940, in Reno. They spent their honeymoon in Sugar Hill and became known on Main Street as Mr. and Mrs. Farnsworth, which is kind of interesting. When we all think of Bette Davis, we don't think of a married name with her. But she was known as Mrs. Farnsworth, all right, in town. So that's the part, the connection that brought her to the North Country. And she started coming up here, as we said, 1939. And she stayed up here right through the 1940s. So she was here for quite a while, right up to about 1950. And became, as I said, a fixture in stores and on Main Street and at parties. As I said, she made numerous friends in the Littleton, Sugar Hill, Franconia area. Now, I did jot a few notes to try to keep myself on track here. Okay? Now, one thing about the house, Bette Davis's house is still there, by the way. And last summer, the people who owned the house stopped into the museum, and she said, you know something, we rent it out, and it can be rented. After that, I had some people who came in to visit the museum, and they said that they were renting it. And they said it was actually cheaper to rent the house for their group than it was to stay in a hotel. Not too bad. Stay in Bette Davis's house, and it was, for, I believe it would take 10 people. Don't know what the policies are now, but it's worth looking into. All right. Now, I'd like to move over to the showcase that we have here, filled with Bette Davis memorabilia. And Glenn is going to zip down here. And if you notice down through here, there is a photo album. And it says, official photographic record, Bette Davis's birthday celebration and world premiere of Warner Brothers picture, The Great Lie, April 5th, 1941, Littleton, New Hampshire. Now, there's not many small towns in the United States that has a photographic record of a major movie star taken by a major movie production company. So what we have is all the photos, and if you can get this, I scanned all the photographs, and they are in this picture frame, and it creates an ongoing slideshow. So when we have guests here, they can actually see what is in that photo album. Rather than opening it, they can actually see the photographs in the photo frame. But I want to share a story about 7 years ago, 6-7 years ago, before we had I think we have a pretty good Bette Davis exhibit. And before we set up the exhibit as it is now, it was not even half of what it was. And we have a tub containing Bette Davis articles, photographs, all sorts of Bette Davis memorabilia that we have in storage. That album used to be in that tub in storage. So these 2 young ladies, I said, okay, do you want to see something really cool? And they said, yeah. So I brought it out and I opened it up, and it was like I just showed them pictures of Santa Claus. They were just totally taken with it. So I gave them white gloves and let them go through it. And one of them said to me, do you know where I work? I said, no. She says, I work at the Warner Brothers Museum in Los Angeles. No kidding. She said, yeah. She said, we don't have one of those. I've never seen one. We don't have one. I said, do you know why? She said, no. I said, because we do. And they all chuckled, but they just loved it. It was like the holy grail of Hollywood stardom happening here. So I wanted to show that we do have that. It is the only one in existence, the photo album. And I have to look at my notes just to keep myself going here online. So in here also, we have, if you notice, there are badges that have Betty's pictures on them. And it says Bette Davis birthday party, April 5th, 1941. It says official, and this one over here says guest. And if you look through the photos, now if you go to our, if you go to our Facebook page, Littleton Historical Museum, you can actually go down to our pictures. All these photographs are there. So if you want to look at them, just go and check out our photos, and you can find the whole album has been scanned and it's on Facebook. And you will see people, reporters, coming up on the train from Boston, New York, Hartford, reporters who came from California, who took the train across country and switched in Boston to come up here to Littleton, all wearing those buttons with Betty's picture on it. And it's just the coolest thing, I think. Now, Betty loved Littleton. She really loved Littleton. And in this photograph, you can see, that good, Glenn?
Yep.
You can see a picture of Betty reading the Littleton Courier on set in Hollywood. Because what you would do is, our newspaper comes out once a week. Did then, still does now. All right? And she would have it sent by train, and she would keep up on all the news that was going on Littleton. Love this photograph. You don't have too many movie stars reading the Littleton Courier. And so this is really a trophy picture, I call it. All right. Now, her birthday, April 5th, 1941. And it was also, now while I'm talking, if Glenn wants to get some shots of more photos. Now, before I zip off, the big photo here of Bette Davis, that was one of her publicity shots for her movie Jezebel. Jezebel is the movie that is playing on the TV set just opposite. And when the museum is open, we just have this looping and playing through so guests can come in. When we have the younger generation come in and they have no idea who Bette Davis was, I can point to the movie and say, that's Bette Davis. They go, she was that famous? So, yeah, she won a couple of Academy Awards, world-renowned actress. And they go, really? I said, yes. And she used to live up here. So it's very impressive. And I love to crow about Bette Davis. So Betty's birthday, April 5th, 1941. And it was also, and I am going to take and unravel this. And maybe I won't unravel. There we go. This is one of the original banners that were hung in the Opera House at the movie theater. So this goes back, this is 1941. All right? And she wanted her movie, The Great Lie, to make its world premiere in Littleton. She told Warner Brothers it will be in Littleton, New Hampshire. Now, the movie theater we had is not the movie theater we have. Back then, it was called the Premier Theater. And if you're at all familiar with the town of Littleton or with Main Street, where the movie theater is located currently at the corner of Main Street and Pleasant Street, right around the corner on Main Street, there is a restaurant, and it is called a Coffee Pot. Well, at one time, the Coffee Pot used to be the lobby, the entrance for the movie theater. We have the sign for the Premier Theater. It was given to us maybe 3 weeks ago, and our volunteer, Joan Noyes, did a beautiful job cleaning it up, and Joan's sitting over there, and we're going to be hanging it up soon, and so that was the opening of it, and it had a big marquee over the front of it. So she told Warner Brothers the world premiere will be there. Now, how many small towns with a population at that time of about 3,500 held a world premiere of a movie, a Hollywood premiere? Littleton had its taste of Hollywood that night. it was absolutely phenomenal. And what she did is the theater would hold 750 seats. All seats were sold. The ones that weren't sold out, Betty bought, and she bought the more expensive ones and gave them as gifts. Now, the most expensive seat was $7. That's $7 in 1941. That would be like going out now and spending about $95 on a ticket. So it was a lot of money in 1941. We were still at the tail end of the Great Depression. We hadn't quite entered World War II. We were, let's see, April, we were about 8 months away. Now, her birthday was held above our heads. 2 floors above us is the Grand Hall for the Opera House, and yeah, Glenn's showing right now it's the ceiling. But 2 floors above us is the Grand Hall for the Opera House. That's where Betty celebrated her birthday. The party started around 11 o'clock. It was supposed to start at 9:30, but things were way late getting going with the movie and everything. The movie sold out. What Betty did is 50% of the funds went to Littleton as a donation, Littleton Hospital. And 50% of the funds went to the Golden Rule Farm for Boys. It was a farm for homeless or troubled youth, boys in Tilton. Later it became the Spalding Youth Camp. And some people watching this might remember that. So half went to the boys and half went to the hospital. Now, Littleton was just, I have an article, and I really, I usually don't like to read on the program, but it has everything. This is reprinted from April 10th, 1941, the Courier. The most brilliant and awe-inspiring event in the history of Littleton, and one of the greatest of its kind ever held in New England, occurred on Saturday, when the world premiere of The Great Lie, Warner Brothers' latest screen triumph, and the birthday of the picture star, world-famous Bette Davis, were held simultaneously in the shopping metropolis of the White Mountains. That's why it had to be read. I just couldn't say it better myself. It was the first time in the history of New Hampshire that a world premiere had ever been staged in the state, and a crowd of it estimated of 10,000 from all parts of the Granite State, as well as other sections throughout eastern United States, converged in Littleton for the gala event. Now, the population of Littleton was around 3,500 or 4,000. We had 10,000 on Main Street. And the photographs in the album would attest to that. Remember, check it out on our Facebook page. Never in the annals of the North Country have police had such a problem on their hands as 80-odd officers on duty Saturday night faced in handling congested traffic and an excited crowd of thousands of men, women, and children hungry for a glimpse of Miss Davis, in whose honor Littleton had been preparing for 2 weeks the sensational day's program. Several times during the awaiting for Betty's arrival, on the pedestal erected in front of the Premier Theater, the shouting crowd surged forward to break the grip of municipal police and state troopers, who frantically tried to maintain a cleared area with a human train. Overcome with the excitement and nervous tension, when several shouted, "Here she comes!" the spectators nearly swamped police as they closed in on the stand. Despite the pushing and jamming of the thousands that blocked Main Street for several hundred feet, no serious injuries were reported, although several young ladies in the front ranks barely escaped when the surging mob crushed them against the wall of determined police officers. Firemen in uniform came to the assistance of police and strengthened the cordon up to prevent a complete rout and keep things well in hand. Despite all this, however, enthusiasm got the better of the onlookers when the beautiful Lincoln Cabriolet bearing Miss Davis and other celebrities pulled up to the curbing. Can you picture that? It was a black convertible, and she was sitting in the back seat wearing this dress, okay? Wearing this dress, and a white ermine stole. And you have a picture, Glenn?
I do.
So to give an idea, there were two photographs. The top one, how's that?
A little closer. Right there.
So that is the Coffee Pot restaurant right now. And there's people out in front on Main Street at the corner of Main Street and Pleasant. What's the other photograph? Oh, this is the Opera House where we're located. And remember that some of you may remember there was a statue out there. It's now in the cemetery. But right at the statue, there was a band that played country music. Those to quell the crowd for those who couldn't get into the movie and those who could not get into the party and the dance. Okay? So to give an idea of what everything looked like on the day. Okay? While the movie, okay, here we go, premiere outtakes, the new picture, The Great Lie, is a story of the eternal triangle with Bette Davis, George Brent, and Mary Astor, shown without any cutting. The picture required an hour and 40 minutes to run off and was enthusiastically applauded by the scores of newspaper, radio, and screen magazine writers, as well as other first-nighters. While the movie was being shown, several thousand people unable to attend were entertained on Main Street as the powerful Klieg lights continued to pour their white rays down on the throng. Got to tell you this, there were 3 huge lights, searchlights, on top of buildings. They were, I believe, 3,000 watts each. And in order to make these lights operate properly and not throw the whole town of Littleton into darkness and burn out our water and light department, that special transformers were installed by the water and light department in order to keep the Klieg lights burning, okay? And in order to conduct electricity properly. As it was, when they turned them on, part of Littleton still went dark. All right? Miss Davis appeared in a pretty black gown. Here she is. This is the gown. Pretty black gown with crepe effect sleeves trimmed with white lace peplum. A very plain and lovely formal gown. A huge red flower attached to the collar. There it is. All right. Miss Davis made a pretty picture as she officiated at the cake-cutting ceremonies. Her rollicking laughter proved infectious and put everyone at ease to thoroughly enjoy the unique event. Can you imagine hearing Bette Davis laughing upstairs in the Littleton Opera House? Now, I want to tell you, Bette Davis's cake. This is Betty's cake. And that's Mr. Corkum decorating it. And they ran McKee's, okay, which was across the street from the Methodist Church. The building is still there, by the way. All right. So to continue on with this, all right, the giant 4-tier birthday cake baked by Gerald Corkum of McKee's Food Shop in Littleton for Miss Davis weighed over 100 pounds. 30 pounds of frosting, 10 pounds of butter, 10 pounds of fruit, 16 pounds of flour, 16 pounds of sugar, and 160 eggs. Try to bake that in your home oven. All right? It was decorated with lettering, Happy Birthday, Betty, and a fine reproduction in cake of Betty's Butternut Lodge. So her home in Sugar Hill was called Butternut Lodge. Mr. Corkum replicated it in cake and put it at the top. Without a complete report at hand, it was estimated this week that between $2,500 and $3,000 probably would be realized from the event. The proceeds will be divided evenly between the Littleton Hospital and the Golden Rule Farm for Boys, named by Miss Davis as co-sharers. When all funds have been turned over to the treasurer, Ralph E. Colby, an audit will be made for complete statement. Mr. and Mrs. Farnsworth, you notice we've gone back to our married name, left yesterday for Hollywood going by car to New York, where they will board a train. Betty has to start work on another picture. The Little Foxes. Familiar? On Monday, she said her mother, Mrs. Ruth Faber, would arrive at Butternut Lodge in June to spend the summer, and Betty and her husband are expected to return in the fall for 2 or 3 months vacation. Boys at the Golden Rule Farm who were not able to see Bette at Littleton were not forgotten by the film star. She sent what remained of her big birthday cake to the farm for distribution to the children who were not in the group to visit. Members of the Plymouth College Band that serenaded the star in Littleton will each receive an autographed picture from the star when she gets back to Hollywood. I couldn't have said this better myself. It had to be read. Now, Bette had several birthday parties. She had one at the Thayers Hotel, which was on Main Street in Littleton, one at a building that no longer exists in Franconia, and it was called the Iron Mine Inn. Now, some people might remember that. It is where Peabody and Smith real estate is, at the corner of Main Street as you go to get up to Route 93. All right? She had one at up at the hotel where she used to stay with the Pecketts up at Peckett's Inn. All right, and then she had the birthday party upstairs. It must have been one tired lady. All right. Now, I have a couple of stories. Being the curator, I get to meet people. There was a wonderful lady who lived in town, Pat Bilodeau. Her father was caretaker for Bette Davis's property. They lived in a house provided by Bette and all the furniture. Pat passed away just about a year ago. A little over a year ago, excuse me, this past March. Pat used to work at Shaw's, and I used to always go to her line. She would tell me nothing about Bette Davis. But we invited her a year ago. We had a birthday party for Bette, her 111th, and Pat didn't come. And I said, well, Pat, I says, I said, we missed you at the party for Bette. She said, she says, it's just Bette Davis. I used to see her all the time. Oh, yeah. And there were all sorts of photographs that she had when she passed. It went to family members. But she told me that Bette gave her a sled one Christmas when she was a little girl. Also, she said that when Bette sold the house and her father was no longer employed, Bette said, take everything and anything you want out of your house where you are living on my property to get set up in your new life. Pat thought the world of Bette. Bette used to send Christmas cards when Pat's father passed away. Bette sent flowers. They received birthday cards. I think Bette was a wonderful person. A lot of people get her mixed up with Joan Crawford and say, well, wasn't she mean to her children? I'm not going to say, and I don't even know if Joan Crawford was mean to her children. But that was a Pat Bilodeau story. There was another gentleman, Win Merrill, who passed away last October. But Win was a museum member, and you can actually see and hear an interview with Win and I if you go to YouTube and type in Littleton Historical Museum, and you will find me in Win. But Win was a Sea Scout or something like that, a Boy Scout, and he said, yeah, he says we had to go out and we had to hold flares and like keep people back, and we wore shorts, and it was cold. And I said, so did you ever meet Bette again? He said, oh yes, I worked at the Littleton hardware store. He said, she didn't treat her mother nicely. I said, well, what do you mean, when? And he said, well, they came in once looking for a baby scale. He remembered what they wanted, a baby scale. And he said, her mother spoke up, said something, and Bette just snapped at her. He said, I would never speak to my mother that way, he said. I said, well, did you say anything? He said, well, I couldn't. It was Bette Davis, So it was one of my favorite stories of Win. Matter of fact, Win's family asked me to eulogize him at his funeral. That's a story that I did bring up. Now he's with Bette, and hopefully he told her how he feels. Another friend that I had, Floyd Ramsey. Okay, Floyd was a history teacher in Lincoln. Wrote several books, and I knew Floyd and his wife very well. Floyd said, well, you know, I have a story about Bette Davis. My father had one. Betty Street was a dirt road, and it ended. So when you got down there, you had to back up and come around. He said, my father drove down her street, and Betty was standing on her front porch, smoking. And if you ever see Betty smoked like a chimney. And he said he looked, and he had to back up and do a wide turn so he could get out. And he says, Betty was up on a porch, just staring at him, smoking her cigarette. And he backed up a little too far and bumped into a tree on her front yard. She took the cigarette out of her mouth, and he said, you never heard such language come out of a lady's mouth in your life. You didn't mess with Betty. And one of the things that I've got to tell you about Betty, it was her lawsuit that helped break the ties, the control that the big movie industries had over their stars. Because if you were a star, you signed with, they owned you. You signed with Paramount, MGM, Warner Brothers, whoever. They owned you. They told you what movies you were going to do. They told you where you were going to go. They rented you out to other companies. She broke that. And she was one of the people who helped move the movie industry forward for the actors. All right? And then finally, there was a lady who came in, about 2 years ago. There was a high school reunion, alumni day. And I opened the museum, and one person came in. But we were talking, we're standing right here. And she said, I have to tell you a Bette Davis story. I said, okay. She said, one day I was in high school, I'm walking down the street, and there were a bunch of girls gathered out in front of a store. And I went up and said, you know, what are you doing? And they said, Bette Davis is in that store buying shoes. So they were daring each other to go into the shoe store to get an autograph from Bette Davis. She said, I went in. I went right in, and there's Betty with her socks on and foot's up. She's being measured. And I sat right next to her. And she said, Betty turned to me and said, I suppose you want an autograph. And the girl said, no, we can talk for a while. And she said, I sat there with Betty for about 10, 15 minutes and just talked. And when I was done, Betty gave me an autograph. I thanked her and left. That's a side of Bette Davis that a lot of people don't know. I think she was a wonderful person. And I'll tell you, she was a little ball of fire. So thank you for tuning in. And I've done 33 minutes. So thank you for tuning in. This will be on YouTube, posted in about 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And have a good day, and see you tomorrow. Don't forget, I'm doing live music, 9 a.m. on Sunday morning. Sunday morning appropriate music. Take care. Like our museum.